Before we move on to our next session, which is with Camila Budden, the chairperson of Protect the West Coast, they brought out a documentary, I think it was in November or December last year, which is another incredibly emotive film, and I encourage you to watch it. I think it is available for free on YouTube. But like I said, before we go live with Camila, we're just going to show a quick trailer for the film that they made.
They don't have any sympathy because money makes them hard, money makes them cold. They lose their feelings for other people.
This land we call our home, generations walk these shores. We are wild until we go.
I think if people realized what was happening there would be much more concern.
Blood in the flowers bloom inside every
Die see kruip in ons bloed.
all of creation sacred to the end of time.
Dit is ons heritage. So jy kan nie in ons heritage kom gate dril.
Daar het al die tyd te veel versoek.
Geen gaan ons ekosistem versteur. Dis maar al.
Welcome back, everybody, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Camila Budden to our summit here today. Camila, thank you so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me here today.
So some context for our viewers. Camila is the chairperson of Protect the West Coast, and you would have just seen Camila, they have just seen the trailer to your documentary, Ours Not Mine. So everyone's feeling quite emotionally charged. I know the full documentary is available on YouTube and on your website as well, so you might be seeing some traffic after the summit here today, and hopefully that is the case. Given what everybody has seen, it was just, I think, a short 2-minute trailer. They've gained a decent understanding of the complexity between both the environmental, the industry and the economics, and of course the local community there as well. But I'm curious to know, I think this documentary came out maybe 3-4 months ago. What are the latest updates since they came out, and if there is any?
So we sort of ended off the year with launching the movie premiere. So we launched it at the end of November last year. So it was sort of in the wrapping up stage of the year. But however, it did come at a time when, after that we had quite good reach, and we had a lot of organizations and civil groups reaching out to us and sort of sharing our sentiments. So that was a really positive outcome. Along with the CEO of MSR reached out to us, whether this had to do with the film, it may not have been the case, but it was really great around that time to have him reach out and sort of, as us being one of the stakeholders that he'd need to engage with along the coastline, to really get him, at the table with us, chatting about, they would like to stick around, and they've got a lot of plans to still, sort of work in the Cape West Coast, and how can they collaborate or sort of meet other stakeholders' concerns and work with them to ensure that we all are getting on well enough to move forward. So we really appreciated that, because that also just highlighted, we often in these sort of environmental, civil versus corporate battles, there's always the middleman, often being the law in between, and you don't often get to sit at the table with the opposing party. So that really brought a real human element in, and we felt it felt like a positive outcome.
Which is actually quite encouraging. I think, like most people, I first came across MSR, and we're not going to pick on our Australian friends, but I believe they are Australian founded company. I mean, I first came across them when they were also doing mineral sands mining, I think, in the Transkei, and the big story there was around the, I hope I pronounce it correctly, the Olobeni tribe out that way. A lot of social conflict there as well. But I believe they've had a change in management. So you would have met maybe a new CEO, so which might have brought a different personality and softness to the negotiation process.
Most definitely. There was a new CEO, and he actually said that, you know, as part of, he's come on board and he would really like to leave a legacy. A lot of the shareholders nowadays really care about ESG and how, you know, the impact they're having in the world, and wanting to have more of a positive one that's long lasting for future generations. And that they're needing to answer to their shareholders. So he said for himself, you know, he's got quite a good track record with his experience in the mining industry. And he said one of the approaches he has is he really likes to engage with other stakeholders and get around a table to discuss where can we possibly work together, and what are your needs, what are our needs. So I respected that, and I think it's a great strategy when trying to come to some sort of middle ground.
Yeah, and then in the asset management space and investment kind of arena, that engagement between companies and shareholders is becoming increasingly important. So it's encouraging to see them being proactive on that conversation anyway. Typically, when I'm looking at commodities and minerals, it's mainly your oil, gold, copper, iron ore, coal, etc. But if I Google kind of mineral sands, I've met with names that I'm not very familiar with, and I doubt many people are. So what exactly are they mining there off the West Coast?
So we were also not that familiar with some of these names when we were like, what are they mining? We don't understand. And heavy mineral sands is quite a vague label for what they're doing. And I mean, I'll throw some names at you that, you know, a lot of them, I heard them for the first time when we started investigating what was going on up the coastline. So rutile, ilmenite, zircon, monazite, and high-grade garnet. And they're all used for a variety of profitable industrial and commercial applications. Some are for abrasive powders, sanitary ware, even toothpaste. So there's no just one direct use of the mineral sands. And I think our West Coast, as we can see, the amount of, I think, really sudden, increasingly large volume of prospecting applications going in, that they're clearly finding that the sands are pretty high in minerals.
I think you touched on quite an important point there, is the items that you mentioned. So even like toothpaste, for example, they're necessary goods, I guess, for humanity. So it's about striking that balance of, you know, meeting certain human demands. And this came across quite strongly, and maybe I can try to show it later on the summit, of what Nedbank are saying about meeting human demands, but with that coming a responsibility to nature, not causing unnecessary degradation. So profit in the place of planet, for example. So that balance, I'm curious to know what concessions have the mining company made between yourselves and the other stakeholders. I don't know, and maybe also touch a little bit, because when we met a few weeks ago, the topic of rehabilitation was something that came through quite strongly as well.
So, you know, we started in 2019, near the end of the year. And so we've just been, as an organization, kind of been going for a year and a bit. Our intention was not necessarily to formalize as an organization, but we noticed with time that it's not just MSR that's the only mining company that is an issue up the West Coast, which we'll get into further on in our conversation. So they've been one of the companies we have been engaging with, just purely because their 10 beach extension, which takes over, it amasses to a distance of 52 kilometers of pristine coastline up the West Coast. So we've been engaging with them through letters and lawyers on transgressions that they've been doing, and they've kind of been getting back to us, and DMRE. And I can't say that we have met any sort of, no concessions have necessarily been made yet. But, you know, being new to this game, I'm realizing things don't just happen overnight. And, the conversation has only really just started. And one of the things we chatted about with the CEO was on the mining industry up the coastline, creating an association which we would hope will help them in self-regulating themselves and becoming whistleblowers for themselves, because the government at the moment has not shown to have the capacity to sort of monitor their activity and make sure that they're following the protocols that they need to be, and following what was agreed on in the post EIAs, etc. So it's kind of like we're in the process of chatting to them, and we're hoping that we would like from their side, and it's going to be a long journey for them to self-organize, to create some sort of association as a mining industry. And then to do with like the rehabilitation plans, I can really just touch on what has been an issue in the past is that mining companies, and I think that's why there's a lot of distrust in civil society and this sort of negative association with mining, is that where there has been this responsibility to put aside funds into a rehabilitation fund that would then be allocated to restoring the area once the mine has come to the end of its life cycle. And there's been ways in which some mining companies have found loopholes or ways around actually using those funds. And just to give two examples, one would be to put the mine on a maintenance plan where you have maybe just a security guard. You've got a low cost sort of maintenance plan going, and it can go on for as long as you want, 20 years, and that's a lot cheaper, you can imagine, than paying all of that money into actually rehabilitating the area, which they a lot of the time they have to put billions aside for the restoration plan. And then another way is by selling on the mining rights to a smaller company that cannot uphold the restoration obligations. And we've seen this happen. Mining before Protect the West Coast, I didn't really know much about it. So this is stuff that this is all sort of loopholes and information that I have learnt myself over the last year and a bit.
Yeah, I think what we're going to try and do, I'm going to see if the tech guys can bring up the map with all the current and recent prospecting and mining applications, and that's not just on the coast but offshore as well, which talks a little bit to some of the points you raised earlier. And I can see it on the left-hand side of my screen now, and it really is quite prolific. I mean, there's almost uninterrupted space where no applications are currently being made. So it's obviously been highlighted as an area for development. Interestingly, when you hear our President Cyril Ramaphosa talking, he talks about, that economic development and our competitive advantage in mining and natural resources, which we can use to the benefit of inclusive growth. Which kind of really begs that question of the environmental impact assessment, because you brought the term EIA earlier, so I just wanted to highlight that for people listening that might not be familiar with it. It's environmental impact assessment. And one thing I learned from watching your documentary was that this is something that used to fall under the realm of the Department of, I think it's Forestries, Fisheries and Environment, so that's Barbara Creasy as a minister, and now actually falls under the realm of the Department of Mineral Resources, which almost, as I think you had a lady from the UCT department talking about this, the conflict of interest that is there. I mean, you got your DMR are massive proponents for exploration and mining, and they're supposedly doing the EIA, and so there is that conflict of interest, which I'm sure you starting to see, and therefore made that other interesting comment. Sorry, I realize I'm going on a bit here, was that you're asking these companies to actually, which I found very interesting, is to be stewards of their own work and be transparent and actually monitor themselves. And I'm assuming that's something that they brought to the table as well, acknowledging maybe some of those governance shortfalls. And I know how this kind of fell on I say fell on your lap, but you also actively sorted out when we caught up those couple of weeks ago. I mean, I think you said you're from the surfing community and you would go up to these wonderful places. You mentioned a whole bunch of famous surfers who have absolutely no idea who they are. You did mention Katie Slater, and I do know that name. But you go out to these far sort of unseen, beautiful hotspots but because it's unseen, it means a lot of this activity can happen beyond the public eye. And I know you also mentioned, I think, is it an organization called Run West, who are also looking at raising awareness around this just by setting up a race along the coastline, and really draws attention to what's happening over there. And I mean, you did mention also the cultural heritage, and we nearing the end of our session. My eyes just peeking down to the clock there, but we haven't even touched too much on the social. And I encourage everybody that has dialed in to go and watch the documentary, because a lot of Camilla and my discussion today might have been environmental leaning, given our topic of biodiversity, but the social element actually comes through more strongly, if not more prevalently, in that documentary. And the voices of the local community, I think, needs to be heard and be held and acknowledged, not just by governance, but by the company as well, and civil society at large. So Camilla, thank you so much for joining us today and being the anchor of our summit for the first quarter of 2022. And yeah, just a thank you from myself, and for being so brave and continuing to do the work that you guys are doing. I'm sure it's tested your patience. It becomes a labor of love. But yeah, keep pushing, and we'll keep a close eye on developments up the West Coast. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.